the special. Now, though people who were reading the advertisement and they didn't grow up in Eretz Yisrael, you have to ask your at least someone got that. So those who read the signs that they're not from Eretz Yisrael, so they're not sure what the name of this particular Me'ura is called. So they only saw the Hebrew poster, not the English one. Poi Anel. What it's a hard word to know what that is. But then they able to help that they got the sign in English, so they thought it was a panel. So you went them a panel. I see Rabbi Itkin is here, and I learned by Rabbi Itkin of Basra, just so you shouldn't think it was wasting time. And Basra real gods is Kissen Levain, and one of them is panels, right? So there's even a panel though. So, but this panel, mir gebeten nechet von Rabbi Yonason Hakner, mir gebeten übergeben, als soll auslöschen die cellularische Telefonen. Und yeah, das ist can move on. And of course, Rabbi Yonason had this chus. I don't know if you know, when you listen sometimes to Fabrengens, you hear Rabbi Yonason speaking in the hookups. That's who's speaking, and you see him here. So he has a big chus. We're only mikzah shvach telefon up here today. But the panel is about Yud Nisan. Nisan is a heilige tag, a freiliche tag, and a lebendige tag, and just a very, very special day. Begashmis and Beruchnis. And you ask why I say Begashmis, it's a special day. I'm sure the Choshev Rabbanim here will speak about that also. The Rebbe once told somebody that when you're here and you're spending some time, you have to take back with you some Gashmis and some Ruchnias. And this is Rabbi Lou's story, so you have to keep track in the audience here what he has to tell. That's going to be one of the things. We're going to put some of his Nakudas here together. And it's a special day for Chassidim. Special day, it always was. So one of the things that in the later years of Yud Nisan, I should say the later, from the early Lamets, from the Rebbe's 70th birthday, from the Rebbe was really 69, was the union of the Negunim. We'll talk about that, and Rabbi Lou will speak a little bit more about how the fact that the Rebbe was Misyaches to Negunim and Psukim of his kapitel in Tehillim, even in earlier years when it wasn't yet popular, and it wasn't yet an official niggun for the year on the Rebbe's kapitel. Just like the Rebbe wrote sometimes a word or a posik from his kapitel when he wrote it in either a michtav kloli or in a telegram, something the Rebbe quoted from the kapitel. But there were times that the Rebbe also had them sing negunim that already existed. The famous ones, of course, are Tzom Alocha Nafshi, and Rabbi Lu will tell us also about Ach Lelikim, etc. But to begin, we have with us here today somebody who has this chus nifla to having had composed several of the nigunim, which became the official nigunim of the Rebbe of that year. And just before I call him up to share with us some of his special reflections on this, I want to mention that in Mems, the Rebbe's nigun was always the first nigun that was sung by the Fabrengen. When the Rebbe came in to Fabrengen, they would sometimes sing something else, but then it was quiet because on a weekday Fabrengen, the Rebbe always said a sicha first, right away when he sat down, before he even made Beit Priya Gofen and or Mezoines. But on a Shabbos dike Fabrengen, the Rebbe made Kiddush first and or made Beit Priya Gofen, etc. And after the Rebbe drank from the wine, the Rebbe nodded, and they would always start to sing the nigun of that year. That was the same by every Fabrengen. whether it was Shir, Mizmer, whatever it was. So we have with us now today two younger light who have that great privilege. Well, first, I would like to call upon Reb Sholem Brochstadt, who's Reb Sholem Halevi Brochstadt, who is a well-known Baal Menagin, who has the schus, who will share with us some reflections on the Rebbe's Negunim, followed by Rabbi Chosid, Reb Feitel Halevi.
Okay. Pashit, ich kann reden gut Englisch. Okay, kein kol mich nicht reden, aber ich potable klum. Der Emes ist, der ganze Kredit von der allen Nigunen, von den neuen Nigunen, kommt Feitel Levin. Das ist 100%. Weil wenn wir sind gewesen, wenn ich gewesen ein kleiner in Lud, später in Kfachabad, geboren in Lud, ist kein Kol, diese Chrenes ist, als ein Nigen, Rems Nigen, sie kommen zurück von Reben, die wir sind gefahren zum Reben, kommen zurück, gebracht mit Nigen, und der was sie gefahren hat heute lang dem Nigen, und ich denke, viele am meisten, ich habe eine Schwester, eine Kleinstück, sie einzig ist eine Bobbe, aber sie gewinnen alt 4 Jahre alt, und dann sind sie gekommen zurück von da, sie gewinnen Darko-Kolokeno, da liegen, und sie gewinnen 4 Jahre alt, und der was sie gekommen zurück, und ich gewinnen, der Gäste Balmenagen, sie hat so, ich habe klar dem Liegen, und singt, ich kann nicht haben die Noten, hat mir genommen die Mädel, die Kleinstücke, und hat er weggesetzt auf den Tisch, und sie hat sich lang der Mädel dem Liegen, und hat später, ihr Namen, von Jemelton gewonnen weiter, ihr Namen ist Darkepot. Eine kleine Schwester. Aber Akoponim ist, später ist er rausgegangen, die Lubavitcher Rekord. Mit dem hat man gelebt, Lubavitcher Rekord, sie gewinnt, die einzige, was ich gewinnt, Bechlal, nach Schubben am Minute. Ich bin gar nicht gut von dem. Später geworden andere, versteht sich, wir sind aufgewachsen auf Nicheach, später geworden, die ein alle. Aber an Nigen, ich begann bei Ogelegt bei uns, ich gewinnt bei Ogelegt, also an Nigen, das ist von alter Chassidim, von Menschen, wo es Luchure, darf man sich schreien, Chasse schon sein, von 5 der zurück, aber nicht mit uns. Jemals ist es Achsirische nicht. Versteht sich, als ich, aber ich hatte kein Schum aber mir zu machen nicht. Mit einmal, ich bin doch schon allein gezeigt, und mein Freund, Pfeifel, macht ein Jahr, noch ein Ding. Doch, was da geht, wir können machen nicht. No, ich war sehr, aber ich mir gar nicht, ob es ein Nein Chusch, was Chakem ich wusste, also wir können machen nicht mehr. Ja, das ist Aleph, Später noch als Große deiner, was zu lieb dir, ob ich reingelegt, meine Manigen zum Rebbe. Chakem ich gemacht ein Ding, aber wir gar nicht. Gemacht ein Ding und gar nicht, aber das mal gesagt, das reingelegt, dem Rebbe, dem Ding zum Rebbe, gewiss mit einem Beistage, gesagt, das reingelegt. Und also mir gesagt, die Reaktion was von Rebbe. Ich dachte, bis jetzt habe ich nicht reingelegt, aber ich weiß nicht, wie meine Munde ist stark. Judale fließt, ich will aber der Rebbe soll er mein nicht. Aber ich habe reingeschickt dem Ding. Okay. Ich habe ein Problem mit meinen Nigunim, als ich, wie bald ich mache jeden Jahr, an Nigen, ist mir schwer machen an Nigen, dem kommenden Jahr, weil ich darf machen an Nigen, was ich und trachten, sie bombt nicht in der zweiten Nigen, und ein ganze, das ist ein großes Problem. Und der Rebbe ist offen, wir soll machen weiter Nigunim, und der Rebbe sein mit uns, soll singen, und soll sein, sie sein Nigunim und Nigunim und Nigunim. Lauf darf geheiligen, so sein 10 Nigunim, was ich schenke für Karioyo Leilomim, was sie gewinnt dort, wenn sie gewinnen in Aleph, das gewinnen, Kemef Saisi, sie gewinnen Hashem Basisi, und was daran ist. So sei, in ein Jahr gewinnen das auch, soll die ganze Welt singen, alles singen, again.
Richard Shkoyach, Reb Shalom Halevi. Before we get to the Feitel Halevi, you mentioned now in the end, really from that year, which Reb Shalom was talking about, there were several Nigunim, and Reb Shlomo Kunyas Ozrangezun will be verbringen later on, not here, but he was, I believe, also one of the first that took psukim, and they added it to existing Nigunim. Well, and to the extent that the next year, after that year, they used the same, they recycled the nigun for Kol She'edi, right? So then later, they started with the unique nigunim. So it's my privilege, pleasure, and honor to call upon Reb Feitel Levin, who also was Mechaber, a very well-known, famous nigun for another occasion, the Shchedish Kislev nigun. And I also had, if we reminisce, when I see him, I had a place by the Fabrengen, which really geographically was very close to the Feitel, but there was really not a mechitza, but it was the other side of the table there, but after the Fabrengen, I used to sort of climb up, and he was always nice enough to make some room so I could get up and not be gekvetch, because I used to sit immediately to the Rebbe's left, right? I'm not going to describe it now because that's not Riches B'nei Atzmei, but after that I used to come by Minche, so we used to stand together a little bit, so it brings me back to something very special. Without further ado, the Feitel.
Thank you so much. Briefly, I want to take you back to how it all began. And honestly, when I was asked to speak here, I had a little bit of a dilemma. Dilemma being, today, the bocher that witnesses, that reads, that hears, so the inyan of the nigun takes like a very important place. For me to come and speak about it, I felt that I have to be careful not to blow it up more than what it is. Of course, not to minimize it as well. But the nigun is nicht alt. This is the tool, this is the handle, this is a connector to this big day and throughout the entire year to the capital. Of course, it has a very important place. But when I present it and speak about it, I felt that I have to be careful not to blow it up more than what it should be. Having said that, let's go back a little bit. Like Abshalom said, in his childhood, there was a little bit of abgefrekt that we make nigunim today. I remember at Haseifel, where I work in Saflis, somebody came up a few years ago, and he asked me, I'm sorry if I may ask you, I overheard your name, Feitel Levin. The Feitel Levin that did this and this nigun, is he related to you? Like he must be like a grandfather or an Eltazed? I told him, no, I'm here, I'm facing. Just to say, yes, it was something that in my childhood as well was unheard of. And here is how it all started. From a very young age, I discovered that I was given a talent by the Rebbe Shalom, and I used it. I started composing, lav dafke nigunim, could be songs, and some of them are recorded by now on CDs that we gave out at Simches. And then I said to myself, why not do something with it for us? I always read and heard, this nigun came from this chassid, this nigun came from this chassid, this nigun composed by that chassid, etc., etc. I said, so why don't we hear today, back then, that anyone from our time composes? And of course, when I started to speak about it in Benoit, who are you? Okay. But then when I came here, it's a Gidreit in the Daladamis, more and more I discovered that this was at all not the way that the Rebbe was thinking of Deir Hashvi. I understood a little bit Deir Hashvi, and I understood that we do matter. Yes, we are al gabe ha'anok, but we are who we are. Otherwise, the Rebbe wouldn't be saying and giving us all the shlichus and etc. So again, it started more and more to bother him, like, why not? At that time, like Rabbi Feller said, we used to spend some time together at the Verbringen, since I was part of the Chayzrim, which took me every Shabbos to Rabbi Yoel's house after there was a Verbringen, to Chazar the Verbringen, etc., etc. So I started to ask him about it. Is it ausgehalten that we should make a nigun? So he was all for it. He said, if you feel that you have the talent, you can do it, do it. But then there were a number of chassidim, among them, some of them that were mentioned before as well, that were in ganzen gegen them. Was ist a Junge? It's being recorded, I'm not going to say the exact quote, but a young man is thinking of himself, kann machen, gleicht sich zu dem und dem Chassid, dem und dem Chassid. And Rabbi Yoel argued, was geht ihr on? Was are there? If it's something that brings chizuk, let's try and see. Back and forth, back and forth. And at the end, Rabbi Yoel said, red nicht da so viel. You want to do, you feel you could make one, make one. And at that point, Harninu was born. And since I was then in 770, the Bochim were extremely proud that a Nunigen was made, and we made a recording. Rabbi Yankel Chazan then did singing, if I remember correctly. And it took off. And since then, like they say, the rest is history. Since then, it became, like Shalom said a number of years later, more and more people came on board. And then, as we all know, there was a Vad established because some groups came, and every group represented and campaigned for a nigun and gedaft machem sashtikul seder. Anyway, just one nekuda I want to bring out. Personally, I never heard anything personal from the Rebbe about this inyan. The Kana Mokim, to make a disclaimer. A few days ago, something was printed. Ke'ilu, I received an answer, a written answer of the Rebbe about a nigun, and the answer is printed. So I want to make sure that it is known that I did not receive that answer or any answer. I did receive the answers when I gave out, like Reb Sholem said, like when I gave in a tape with a zettel, I always got niskabel v'tach dover beita, like it was in those days, the standard answers that everyone that you received when you gave something in, if the Rebbe wished to answer. So those answers I received. But the answer that was printed that I received, and Ke'ilu, I was very moved by it, etc., etc., the whole thing around it, nicht gestiegen, nicht geflogen, it wasn't to me. I did speak to the people in charge of it. I believe it was an answer sent to Rebbe Rivkin, I'm not sure, because he also made a nigun that year. I can't say, let him find out and make the correction, but I feel it's my responsibility to say in public that it wasn't to me. And as Mirecha, in a lot of things that are said about me there, Keilu I said, or I feel, or I had this feeling and that hergish, lav davke meduyek, no one called me, no one asked me, so I've doubted somebody knows me so well to know what I was feeling in all those years. However, back to the topic, what is the makeup of a Hasidic nigun? So the Rebbe said himself, and I'll be extremely brief, I believe this was the only mention that I know, to the Inyan of making new nigunim in Vayeshev Nun Beis, when the Rebbe said, as that was also printed there, the nigunim was werden nischadesh mizman lizman, bei anoshim was seinen men mesugel zu dem, und es wird miskabel und chsidim singen, it was a chsidischer nigen. So this is a little bit of an indication what is a chsidischer nigen. When a nigen is composed, and a nigen is accepted, and chsidim sing it, so then it becomes a chsidischer nigen. So lichheure, ebazoi, chsidim today have different styles of singing. And chsidim today are influenced by different styles, and they come from different backgrounds. So if they compose a nigen from such a background, v'hamevin yovin, so probably maybe it's also could be considered a chsidischer nigen. But lichheure, this is not the kavanah. The kavanah chsidischer nigen has to be based on what it always was, chsidische nigine. When we see it as a vad, and I'm not stamped, labeled as vad because I compose as well. And the rule is when you compose, you can't be a judge, which is obvious. This year, let's say, I did not compose, so I took part in the decision making, which, by the way, Baruch Hashem, hat zugetroffen, and so da a shtickl achdus, and Baruch Hashem, that those that try to break that did not have atzloche to succeed, to break up a bissl the achdus, was is gewesen. Und momentan gesehen, also Tage gehen weiter und sein achdus. So when we see it, we hear a lot of nigunim. Everyone means well. Everyone expresses his kashrus. But we want to hear something which is a chsidischer nigen, was man kann singen bei Rebbe, was man kann singen bei Verbringen. And this has to be, number one, stimmen with the words, with the content, with the meaning of the words. The tenuas have to express something. As a composer, I can tell you sometimes, especially as a young man, I get an inspiration, whether it is from thinking, whether it is from playing, whether it is from singing, whether it is by a Verbringen, different times, right, Shalom? We have different times that we get inspired. And we get a piece of a nigen, it makes sense, it's nice, but then you need to make a beginning, an ending, and sometimes young people don't have the patience to put in the effort. So git man a chepetzu, you make something, whether it is otatam v'reach or not, and sometimes this is what breaks, that this whole nigen cannot be something considered because there is a part which doesn't make sense. And really, one needs a lot of patience to go over what his idea and make it better and better. Like I know in my nigunim, especially those that were accepted, I have a chaver, Rebbe Avrom Charitonov, who always was instrumental in fixing up, in doing a little bit or a lot of work to make sure that the nigen stims properly. So it's not something that just happens. So when we are looking to make a decision on a nigen, really every part of the nigen has to express something, has to mean something, has to say something. Sidot kumus hanefesh. So it expresses something. And it has to be in connection with a kapitel really that makes sense. So in conclusion, the vote is about composing a nigen, a nigunim in general, and nigunim for kapitlach. Whoever feels that he has that talent should definitely develop it. At the same time, get a little bit of mentoring from senior people that can guide a little bit in Pashat Hadrocha. It's a short, you hear young guys in Gelait or Bochim that have the talent, but they don't have the patience or the vision of exactly how to go about it. So someone that has it, definitely develop it and take it to the level where we can make a chsidische nigen, was is lenachas ruach ulerotzein, und that's something which is extremely important. But as I said, let's remember the niggin is only the tool and the handle to which we connect with this special day. V'hamaisa hu ha'ikir to follow b'drochav asher hironu. And in Mirz Hashem, let's hope that the Korev Mamesh, dem Yud Aleph Nisan, wir sein zusammen mit dem Rebbe, es wird uns ausnehmen von Golus und führen l'Arzeinu HaKadosh Ateke vom Yad Mamesh. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Shekoyach, Rabbi Levin. Thank you very much. And I don't want to take too much time here. But everyone knows also some of the Negunim evoke Gaguim, especially in different Hageshim, and the nigga that we were left with from singing by Fabrengen, there was a few Negunim afterwards also that was sang, but not by Fabrengen per se. Of course, the nigga of Shuva and the Tnua that the Rebbe, it wasn't part of the original part of the nigga. But the last tune of that the Rebbe made it, they should sing it over again and again. That tune, it's an interessant zach. It's also a chelik of Gaguim. So, Gracias Shekoyach from the Bali Nigila, the state of wegen Tanakh. We speak about it sometimes also in the davening on Rosh Hashanah, Yedei Nagain. We speak about it, but state weiter with only. Anyway, I can't get a. Anyway, I didn't know everyone was that well versed in the services that you say once a year. But anyway, etc., etc. But this is an Indian that Alter Rebbe already spoke about. It's the coolness, the pen of the soul, the heart, etc. So a big yasher koyach. Now to speak a little bit more about the Inyonim of Yud Aleph Nisan, we have with us a great chassidim, and the first one I'm going to call upon really is a chassid who actually grew up with the Rebbe. He was from when he was a little boy, and he was also Reb Zev's father was not only very active in the yeshiva, but was also a gabbai in 770, etc. So Reb Zev himself was a very popular person who was always in 770, etc. To the extent that he was known very dearly to everybody. He was very, very, very famous. But Reb Zev was there to experience so much throughout the years of the Nesias, and till Reb Zev himself became the Gabbai by the Rebbe and had many inyonim, etc. So without further ado, because Reb Zev doesn't like to hear, I'd like to call upon Reb Zev, and at this point we start the Reb Zev Yecheskel HaKoyen Katz, and the panel. And a panel means that this is a Hamshich, and that's where there are microphones here also. So Rabbi Minkowicz or Rav Minkowicz, if you want to interject also, I've the microphone here, and Rabbi Lou also will share it. And from there we're going to start with Rabbi Katz, who's going to be sharing with us. He's going to talk primarily about Tov Chav Beis, but he'll also mention the earlier years a little bit more also, and then the Chavs. And then we'll continue with the Lameds, and then Rabbi Minkowicz is going to share with us also something special about Pesach with the Rebbe. So without further ado, Harav Reb Zev Katz.
Good Yom Tov, everybody. Yom Tov. Mendy, thank you so much for this beautiful introduction. So, interesting, the first Verbringen, which the Rebbe verbringt for Yud Aleph Nisan, was Yud Aleph Nisan, Tov Shin Yud Beis. It was not a Verbringen. The Rebbe said a Maimer, Behechel Kotche, in his room, and the Rebbe gave out, prior to that, a list of people that will be called for the Maimer. There was a selected group of people that went into the Rebbe and heard the Maimer. Years later, there was no Verbringen on Yud Aleph Nisan until Tov Shin Chav Beis, which that was the Shnas HaShishim. Rebbe walked into the Verbringen, holding at that time the first volume of Likutei Sichos was printed, and the Rebbe came in holding the first volume of Likutei Sichos. and together with it also a maimer which begins Achimois, a maimer of the Rebbe Shmaseden, Rebbe Rashab. And this was in front of the Rebbe for the entire Farbringen. In that Farbringen, there was also something very special, which is very, very rare, that the Rebbe said two mamorim in that Farbringen. One maimer that began with Achimois, and another maimer, Godel Oina Omen Yosef Mamevorich. Man mal gehört, Sidim sagen, that why did the Rebbe say a maimer Godel Oina Omen Yosef Mamevorich at that Farbringen? This was a response to the Chassidim, who at that time was still behind the Iron Curtain, and there was no communication of mail or any other types of communications, phones avanished, and the Rebbe responded to them publicly at a maimer by saying a maimer, Godel Oina Omen Yosef Mamevorich. Very interesting. And many, many years later, when the Rebbe was sending Bacharim Shluchim to Australia, to Melbourne, Australia. We have here Rabbi Minkowicz. He was there to be one of the Shluchim, and I'm sure he'll fill us in with many, many more interesting details. But in one of the years, Reb Chaim Gutnik, Olav Shalom, who was involved in the Anhola of the yeshiva in Melbourne, asked the Rebbe that the Bacharim should leave here before Yud Aleph Nisan and arrive to Australia before Pesach. And the Rebbe writes back to him, the Rebbe did not accept it. The Rebbe writes back to him, what does he see, a reason and a geschmack to leave here before Yud Aleph Nisan? So by the Rebbe, given ungenommen mit Apashtos, as Yud Aleph Nisan darf man sein da. Even though we know that the Rebbe always would answer, and many, many answers printed, that Pesach is a yontiv, what one has to celebrate with his family and be home. But the Rebbe teaches us as a nishkin stira, it's no contradiction. You'll be home for Pesach on time. But at the same time, where do we belong? Yud Aleph Nisan. Yud Aleph Nisan belangt men in die Daladamis. From Yud Aleph Nisan, we step into Pesach. Could sit and talk for hours and hours describing many angles of what happened here Pesach. First of all, we have the Rebbe's Haggadah. In Tov Shin Vav, the Rebbe gave out his first chibur. The Aviv Yem came out before, but something. And the Rebbe came out with a Pirush on Haggadah, and we know how this Pirush hat aufgestürmt the Welt. There's a phenomenal article written by Rav Zevin on the greatness of the Rebbe's, nicht was mit Avhoven Haskomes or the expressions on the greatness, but the fact is that the Rebbe's Haggadah is something fascinating, which in the Haggadah world, there's so many Pirushim and Haggadah. Haggadah is probably the only sefer which was reprinted so many times in Jewish history. But at the same time, this is something out of the ordinary when we're talking about the Rebbe's Haggadah. The Rebbe's Haggadah, in fact, I found this afternoon, this is the edition of Tov Shin Vav, first edition. Second edition came out in Tov Shin Chov Gimel, and it has additions which do not appear in the first Haggadah.
In each one.
Okay, thank you.
Chov Gimel is the Alter Rebbe, so
It was the Shnas HaKam.
yeah.
So in the Hoitzoy of Chov Gimel, there are Hisofis which are printed on the inside of the cover and then on the back of the cover. The Rebbe did not insert it, did not change the format of the Haggadah as it came out in Tov Shin Vav. And when things were added, it was added on the front and on the back. And something which is, I'm sure many of you know it, but it's definitely worthwhile to mention. The Rebbe brings there from a Sicha from the Friedike Rebbe, Sichas Chag Pesach Tov Shin Beis, that the Rebbe Rashab told the Friedike Rebbe that when you go to open the door for Eliyahu Novi, Malta Shvoich HaMoscha, so the Rebbe Rashab told the Friedike Rebbe, called him by his name, by his first name, and told him, Nicht tracht Gashmias, tracht Ruchnias. Or is it nicht Bet Gashmias, Bet Ruchnias? And the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe that he should not publicize this, what he's telling him. If we look through the Siches of Pesach Tovshin Beis from the Frierdiker Rebbe, was the Rebbe Shiktach up to Pesach Tovshin Beis, you will not find it. Finished up. Say, take the Sefer Siches Tovshin, Tovshin Aleph, Tovshin Beis, which is all in one volume, and you will turn to the Siches of Pesach Tovshin Beis, you will not find the Siche which relates to this. But, I'm zucht a bissel amere, in the Rebbe's Rishimis we find it. And it's in the Rishimis, and the Rebbe writes in the Rishimis, Misichais Chag Pesach Tovshin Beis. Because the Frierdiker Rebbe told it, said it, but he didn't say it at a Farbrengen. He said it to the Frierdiker Rebbe said it to the Rebbe. And he tells him that when my father told me, when the Rebbe Rashab told it to the Frierdiker Rebbe, he told me that I shouldn't publicize, and I'm telling you the same. Das nicht mehr farsen sein. But the Rebbe loves each one of us, and anything the Rebbe could treat us to, he treats us. The Rebbe did not keep it as a secret, and the Rebbe revealed it by printing it in the Tavshin Chav Gimel edition of the Haggadah. It reminds me, it reminds me a famous story which the Rebbe spoke about the Alter Rebbe who Yom Kippur went to help a lady that has just given birth. The Rebbe uses the expression, he went to make a yaichel. A yaichel probably means a soup or some sort of a dish, to make sure that that lady who everybody was in shul, this was Yom Kippur, everybody was in shul, and nobody thought of going to prepare food for this lonely woman who has just given birth. And it was the Alter Rebbe himself that went to prepare it and make it. And when the Rebbe erzählt uns die Mainzer, the Rebbe says also that this story was obviously kept as a secret, aber mit das mir erzählt, sagt der Rebbe, hat man sicher gewusst, als ich will machen a Trask davon. So, when the Rebbe, anytime he had something which wasn't published and wasn't known, the Rebbe always treated us. And we should use it. It's in the Sinas Koyach of Din in the Meibischen, of Tonem Rebbe Sinyonim, of Tonem, especially when we're talking about it on such a special day as today. I'll run on the Kudde, which relates to the Pesach. The Rebbe allemal gemon throughout the entire Seder. The Rebbe spoke about it later. There was always a Fabring until Tavshin Lamed. The Rebbe would Fabring the second night of Pesach. The Rebbe would always speak about saying the Haggadah aloud, saying the Haggadah b'koil rom, and saying the Haggadah b'simcha. The simcha b'koil rom. I think the Rebbe says steht das in Kisvei Arizal, that's how it's supposed to be said. By the Rebbe's Tish, on the second floor of 770, there was a Yid that would come every Pesach. His name was Rabbi Katz, Rabbi Yankov Katz. He lived in Chicago and did not miss, not a Pesach and not a Sukkot by the Rebbe. He was an Erliche Yid in the sense of very, very Tmimistic Yid. That's a real Balshemsky Yid. And he would say the Haggadah loud and with gehert. And like I said, it was a Pashita Yid. So there were many, many mistakes in the Ivra of the Haggadah, and the Olim really used to have a good laugh on it later. Atke de Kachem erzählt that there were even times when the Rebbe would smile on certain pronunciations, how he made them in the Haggadah. Anyways, he was the Shliach Tzibur, or whatever word we should use, for saying the Haggadah. And his son Heshi Katz, Olav Shalom, it's worth it. And he would ask the Fir Kashas. Actually like he's asking his father, but he said it loud, and everybody listened to him asking the Fir Kashas. He was a Ben Yochid, And he has a sister Marilyn. And his father, like I said, was a very, very early Yid. He had his hidurim, his chumres. He wouldn't ride on Yontif. He wouldn't write on Yontif. He wouldn't go into the elevator. On Chalamayt, I'm sorry, Chalamayt, thank you. On Chalamayt, he didn't even use the elevator in 770. In Chalamayt, he didn't use either. When Zayara, Yerushalayim Dikayid. But yes, exactly. Yeah. Emes. Yeah, he would go next door. Interesting, in the very early years of the Rebbe's Messias, like the Balabatische Yid in Lubavitch, he took a checkbook, signed the entire checkbook, did not fill in any amount or any date, took this checkbook and sent it into the Rebbe, so that the Rebbe should make the decision what amount to fill into this check. And the Seder given that every Erev Rosh Chodesh, before the Rebbe would go to the oil, would call Rabbi Katz, ask him if he has anything special that the Rebbe wants he should mention at the oil, and at the same time the Rebbe told him the amount which the check is going to be filled out for. He had some sort of a friendship with my father. So every Chalamayid, he would come for a meal to our house. I remember it. After Mincha, like Mincha would be 3:15, like around 20 to 4, quarter to 4, he would show up. I remember hearing something very interesting, but Mishuma, I don't think that it's Mefursa. And he told us that he had heard this and a Yechidus which he had with the Rebbe, that giving year when it was erzählt, whether it was right before Pesach or Chalamayt Pesach, it was Pesach. And he complained to the Rebbe that his son Heshi is into a stamp collection, and the Kop licked him in his stamp collection, and he's not up to his studies, doing well in day school where he went to in yeshiva in Chicago. And that uns erzählt that the Rebbe told him that he should not interfere with his son's stamp collection. And the Rebbe tells him, ich gehad a stamp collection. When ich bin weggefahren von Stub, when the Rebbe left his parents, hab ich das übergelassen. I left it there. And my mother told me later that they sold the stamps, the Rebbe's parents sold the stamps, and they had to live from this money for 6 months, from the money of the stamps. I heard it from him. I was a young kid, but I remember hearing it authentically, and he heard it from the Rebbe. It was either that very same day or a day before, or 2 days before, but it wasn't much. It wasn't the psa. This was the Mocker. The Rebbe told it to him, and I heard it from him a few days later. I think I have to share some time with my Chaverim, so.
Gili, a Shekoyach Rabbi Katz. Was up there, but we'll ask him if Mr. Yitzchok and the other Rabbi Yitzchok, a lot of it too. He also, Rabbi Yitzchok here also, will share with us the Lamshik. So I'm really supposed to give an introduction. Rabbi Lou is a shliach, and but he's also seeked out from all over the world to share in Yonim about the Rebbe and students and engagement and Katz, etc. But he also is a shliach from the community in a place like Peach Tree City, Georgia. Significance of that I'll allow for a different time in the Rebbe on the practice. Zhenko came.
Shkoyach. There's no L'chaim over here, so I'll say L'chaim. And the Mamshik, we've also,
Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach Shechal B'Shabbat.
there was one Fabrengen when the Rebbe Fabrengen on the second night of Pesach,
in all the years till Tafshin Lamed and Va'ad Bechlal, it was already after the Seder. And you don't eat after the Seder, you don't drink after the Seder. So the Farbrengen was dry, nothing on the table, nothing to eat, nothing to drink. And not only that, but after 3 cases of wine, I would say about 85% of the people over there were quite high. And then they ended up
being...
being...
the back there was coats and people were laying on the coats. The Shaz the Farbrengen.
Farbrengen would
I don't
end...
understand where the coats were, but somewhere they were...
The coats were near the sinks. Near the sinks. Near the sink. Near the sink. There was a coat, like a coat racks. But and the Rebbe would Farbrengen, when the Rebbe Farbrengen, the Rebbe had his eyes open. And when the Rebbe said the Maimah, the Rebbe would close his eyes, and the Maimah with a niggin. But in this Farbrengen, the Rebbe said the Sichas also with the eyes closed. And the Rebbe said that everybody was Noch Seder, they looked very much after a Seder. And those who were sitting could not control themselves. So the Rebbe himself, most of the duration of the Farbrengen, had his eyes closed. So you could just imagine what the scene was like. And the second night of Pesach, people who were standing, it's hard to sleep when you stand. And Farbrengen went in about 4 o'clock in the morning. So this was,
Who started the Seder after the Farbrengen?
Who started what? The Seder after the Farbrengen.
Who said that?
All right. So basically, it seems that the Rebbe replaced the second night of Pesach Farbrengen with Yud Aleph Nisan. But because the Yud Aleph Nisan Farbrengen started in a Seder Mesuda in Tafshin Lamed Aleph, which was the year after the last second night of Pesach. The second night of Pesach, the Rebbe would be, of course, upstairs in 770. That's where the Seder was. Then he would come down after the Seder and have the Farbrengen. Now that the Rebbe was home, he was home. So the Farbrengen, l'cha'ira, was really on Yud Aleph Nisan, but that's not quite true. And the reason is because the Rebbe was miyachas to Yud Aleph Nisan every single year. There is not a year that from Tafshin Yud Aleph till Tafshin Nun Aleph, not one year that the Rebbe did not make some kind of a reference to Yud Aleph Nisan, and he did that by saying a mimer, either the Shabbos before Pesach, Shabbos HaGodel, or the Shabbos after Pesach, or the Shabbos after Yud Aleph Nisan, or on Pesach itself, the second night of Pesach, or Achron Shel Pesach, or sometimes all, in all the Mamorim. Shabbos before, Shabbos after Pesach, the Rebbe spoke and would be mavayed a pasuk from that year. How important was the psukim? Well, first of all, as Rabbi Katz said before, that the Rebbe said the Maimah in Tafshin Yud Beis on Adonai Svasai Tiftach, which was part of the capital of that year. But there were other references. For example, and Rabbi Feller made reference to this before, Tafshin Chof Daled, there was the capital Samach Beis. And capital Samach Beis has in it the niggin, anybody know? Ach Lelikim, beautiful niggin, an old ancient song from Lubavitch. And at the end of the Farbrengen of Yud Shvat Tafshin Chof Daled, the Rebbe said, so durchgegangen a ganze Farbrengen, the whole Farbrengen has passed, and I thought somebody would chapzach to sing this niggin. And he turned to Rabbi Krinsky, and he told Rabbi Krinsky, the one who drives me to the tzion of the shver, he should start this niggin. That's what happened. Now, my grandfather, Rabbi Zalman Jaffe, Olav Shalom, loved that niggin, Ach Lelikim. That was his favorite niggin. When he was passing away, he passed away right when we finished singing that niggin to him. It was really special to him. And he went over to some of the Mali Menagnim who were starting the Nigunim in that Farbrengen, and he said to them, I would suggest perhaps he should sing this niggin. And they said, what are you talking about? I was singing this niggin in Yud Shvat. And he said, well, it's from the Rebbe's kapitel. And they said, no, we don't sing such nigunim. We sing more, Lebedik and nigunim or others. It's not that. Niggin is far. This is more that. Rebbe's niggin. And the Rebbe said, I waited the whole Farbrengen, so they should sing that niggin. So the Rebbe was Mesiaches on Yud Shvat. Catch that. Yud Shvat, of course, we know, that they should sing his niggin. And Rabbi Feller said before that when the nigunim started, which we'll talk about in a second, when the nigunim did start, they would sing that niggin on the Shabbos Farbrengens. That would be the niggin with which they would start. The Rebbe would make kiddush, and as soon as the Rebbe finished drinking a rough kos, they would start this niggin, the Rebbe's niggin. What Rabbi Feller didn't say was that by Hakafas, after the Rebbe's Hakafa, when he came back to his place, always the second Hakafa was always the Rebbe's Niggin. On both nights was the Rebbe's Niggin. That was the Seder. The Rebbe didn't really have a Niggin every year. But in Tafshin Lamed, I remember this very well, in Tafshin Lamed, around Shavuos time, not around Yud Aleph Nisan, around Shavuos time, some of the Bachrim put together the Kiyel Kim Yeshia Tzion. And Chavtes. What did I say? Oh, Tafshin Lamed, I'm sorry, it was Tafshin Chavtes. And they sang the Kiyel Kim Yeshia Tzion. It was Kapitel Samach Tes. And no, Kapitel Samach Tes was in Tafshin Lamed. And in Lamed Aleph was Yisisu v'Yismuchu, Lamed Beis was Shnas HaShivim, was Ayin Aleph. So Ayin Aleph was Lamed Beis, Ayin was Lamed Aleph, and Samach Tes was Tafshin Lamed. So Kapitel Samach Tes, the end of Samach Tes is Ki'elikim Yeshia Tzion, and they put these words to Dai Dayenu, a common a Jewish, Dai Dayenu song. And by the way, when you have a Chabad house, and when you start to sing Alachas or whatever you want, Avadim, Ayinu, they know Manishtana and they know Dai Dayenu. That's all Jews know that song. So Dai Dayenu, and all of a sudden it came into Lubavitch, and we don't even realize it that it's the Chunzer Niggin. It's a Veltish Niggin. And the Rebbe, when they sang it upstairs in the second floor of 770, when the Rebbe was having the meals, the Suda, one of the Bachrim sang, I think Chaim Baruch might have sang it, somebody sang it, and the Rebbe said that Gleiche Werte, he liked that. He appreciated it. And then throughout the year, from then till Yud Aleph Nisan, the Rebbe sang Ki'elikim many times. The Rebbe stood to dance by Ki'elikim Yeshia Tzion. Since then, we became one of our Nigunim, Mach Tzadikim. This was, the Rebbe really paid attention to that. In Lamed Aleph, there was V'yasisu v'yismachu, the Nigun of Zoshen Zan Geula, and then Lamed Beis was Shnas HaShivim, and then the 4 Nigunim were made, and then every year a Nigun was made. I want to talk about, though, not just the Nigun, because everybody talks about the Nigun, which was very exciting. Every year was an excitement, and every year was something new, and we sang it all the time throughout the entire year. But I want to talk a little bit about the Farbrengens themselves. And I want to start with Lamed Ches, because I was given the mems to talk about, so I go back to Lamed Ches. I'll go back to other years in a minute, but Lamed Ches was a very special year. As we all know, in Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeres that year, the whole Seder changed, and Yud Tes Kislev was the first time the Rebbe came actually downstairs to Farbreng. The Rebbe spoke, the Rebbe said Sichos and Mamorim all one after the other, spent hours at times, but to come downstairs, the first time the Rebbe came downstairs was on Yud Tes Kislev to Farbreng. The Farbreng was very short, wasn't more than 3 hours. Those days, Lamed Zayin, Yud Tes Kislev was a Thursday night, Farbreng went on for 6-7 hours. So to have a Farbrengen for 2.5 hours was very short, but to have a Farbrengen was unbelievable, and it hadn't happened since Yud Gimel Tishrei. So that was a very big year. On Yud Aleph Nisan of Tafshin Lamed Ches, there was a Farbrengen, short Farbrengen, and then at the end of the Farbrengen, after the Rebbe said the Bracha Achrona, the Rebbe out of the blue all of a sudden said, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, just like that. You could listen to it. It is unbelievable. Those 3 words, the way the Rebbe said it, the hachraza that the Rebbe made in a niggin like that, was unbelievable. And dafka only on Yud Aleph Nisan. Another thing happened in Tavshin Lamed Ches. Because the Yud Aleph Nisan cha'ira, because the Yud Aleph Nisan Farbrengen was short, the Rebbe Farbrenged again on Yud Gimel Nisan that year. Yud Gimel Nisan, the Rebbe started the Farbrengen with a Maimer, and right after the Maimer, the Rebbe started the first Sikha by saying that it is a minute that Yud Aleph Nisan we usually talk in Indian and Nigla, as if we're now continuing the Yud Aleph Nisan Farbrengen. And the Rebbe Farbrenged every year on Yud Gimel Nisan until Mem Zayin, except for Mem Dalet. And Mem Daled, the Kviyas was the same year, the same as this year. So there was the Shabbos, and then Sunday was Yud Gimel Nisan Matzah Shabbos. In Mem Gimel was also the same Kviyas as this year, and the Rebbe Farbrengen on Matzah Shabbos. In Mem Zayin, the Rebbe Farbrengen also on Matzah Shabbos, in addition to Shabbos. But in Mem Daled, the Rebbe did not Farbrengen on the Matzah Shabbos. But every year there was a Yud Gimel Nisan Farbrengen. And the Yud Gimel Nisan Farbrengens were actually Yud Aleph Nisan type of Farbrengen. What do I mean? Yud Aleph Nisan in Tafshin Lamed Aleph was the first year the Rebbe Farbrengen. That year the Rebbe said the Maimer, the Yoim Ashtei Oseg Yoim, which, if you have to talk about the Rebbe's Mamorim, the ones that you really know, or the ones that really demonstrate the Rebbe, the Etzem, talk about Basi Lagani, a couple of others, but the Yom Ashtei Oseg Yoim goes in that category. That's the Maimer where the Rebbe talks about the Medrash that says that the Chacham, the Pikeach, he was the one who says, "Ano Nosef Malka, I want to take the king. I marry the king. I don't care about the Duchstois and all these other people are very important, but nothing is more important than the Melech Aleim." That is the Maimon of Lamed Aleph. Since then, Lamed Aleph, the Aleph Nisan became an official time of the Rebbe's Farbrengen, so it went on the radio. There were Farbrengens that were on the radio those days, before the videos came along. Which Farbrengens were on the radio? Vov Tishrei, Yud Tes Kislev, Yud Shvat, Yud Purim, Yud Aleph Nisan, Yud Beis Tammuz, and Chafal. Those were called, in Lubavitch, they were known as the big Farbrengens. Because you can be sure that there will be a Farbrengen every single year on those days. The other days, there were sudden Farbrengen. L'cha'eda, when things were on the radio, the Rebbe was restricted, if you kavayachol, to topics that people who were listening, who were not necessarily familiar with Halabavitch and Chassidus and Nigla and all of that, they weren't familiar, so the Rebbe stuck to different topics. For example, Tafshin Men Daled, Purim was on Sunday. That Shabbos Shmini, same Kriyas as this year, the Rebbe said the very famous Sikha of Kom Rabba Shachti L'Reb Zera. And the Rebbe said that what I'm about to say, the emes, I should have talked about it on Purim. But on Purim, things are open to other people, and it streams out to on the radio. And who knows, Shema Yishtu Mimenu, there'll be people who will only hear the question, or only hear the story and won't hear the answer, and they'll know about Rabbi Shechting Reb Zera, and they won't understand what happened over there. So the Rebbe was limited, Kvayochel, to what he could talk about on the radio. So Yud Aleph Nisan fell into the same category. Yud Gimel Nisan, now that was Yud Aleph Nisan. That was always a very pnimius dika farbrengen, lots of hesbedim, beautiful hesbedim, and very, very lebedik. The Rebbe was beis galus in those times on Yud Gimel Nisan, and we'll talk about those farbrengens as we move on over here. So Lamed Ches was the first year the Rebbe farbreng not just on Yud Aleph Nisan, but also on Yud Gimel Nisan. The truth is, the Rebbe farbreng on Motzei Shabbos, Yud Gimel Nisan, Tavshin Chavav, was 100 years after the Tzemach Tzedek. But that was an Inyan B'fnei Atzmai. It didn't continue until Lamed Ches, when every year the Rebbe farbreng on Yud Gimel Nisan. So that's Lamed Ches. Lamed Tes, a moidedika thing happened. At the end of the farbrengen, the Rebbe said that they should sing Keliyata. Keliyata, of course, is a Pesach Dikam Nigan. But before Rabbi Yoel managed to start singing, the Rebbe himself went, Keliyata. He said they should sing it, then he started singing it himself. Within about 30 seconds, the Rebbe started clapping. Keliyata, usually sing nice and slow, the slow niggin. It's a serious niggin. And you sing it at the Seder, you sing it at Hallel. It's not one of these happy songs. You listen to the audio of Yud Gimel Nisan Lamed Tes, and the Rebbe was clapping, and the Olam was really responding to that. It's very unusual. It almost sounds like they're all surprised. And it goes a few times. A few times to sing it over. Then the Rebbe says a bracha achreina. After the bracha achreina, the Rebbe usually sang a niggin before he left the farbrengen. The Rebbe started to sing Keli Ata before he left. But when he sang Keli Ata, you listen to the audio, the Rebbe broke down and cried while he starts the niggin Keli Ata. That is unbelievable. Listen to that, to the end of that farbrengen, Keli Ata Lamed Tes. Tafshin Mem was a similar kviyas to this year. And the night of Bedikas Chametz, the Rebbe came back. The Rebbe always went to the Oyel on Yud Gimel Nisan. The Rebbe came back from the Oyel, And he asked if he can go downstairs for a kurze Verbringen, on Bedikas Chametz night. And they said that the shul was closed. They were cleaning it out for Pesach. I couldn't set it up. So after Ma'ariv, the Rebbe sat down on his weekday place. They brought a microphone in because the doors were closed by the tefillas. But Mincha Ma'ariv, upstairs, the doors would be closed. Opened up the doors, and the Rebbe said a sicha. That sicha was really the beginning of the Tzivos Hashem. Tzivos Hashem happened in Tishrei 6 months later. But then the Rebbe started a major shturim about children. Matzah ball contest they made. And he asked, that on that Erev Pesach, he asked that there should be a big shturim with kids. Ad kedei kach, that on Erev Shvi'i shel Pesach, after Shachris, the Rebbe said a sicha, also asking that there should be a shturim to bring children to Mashiach Siddur and all of that. Right?
One of the days there was a Verbringung the night.
It was Chavav you're talking about.
So that I remember.
Hold on. There was not, Lamed Zayin was not. Lamed Zayin Erev Pesach was on Shabbos. Hold on. I'm getting to it. All questions are at the end of the session. Now, the next year was Tavshin Mem Aleph. And then Mem Aleph, Erev Pesach, was on Shabbos. That was the only year, by the way, that the Rebbe Verbringt on the Shabbos, Erev Pesach, and you can't drink wine on Erev Pesach. So the Rebbe had water, and you can't have chametz, and you can't have matzah. So the Rebbe had bananas on us. They can't, charesis minim, charesis you can't have. The Rebbe had bananas, and he had water. And then after the first sikha, the Rebbe said, what's the chokhmah of me sitting here with and only I'm the one who's able to eat? No one else is eating, so he wants to give out the payers. But if he gave out the 3 or 4 bananas that were on the table, it wouldn't be, he said, even if you broke it to the smallest pieces, that wouldn't be enough for everybody. So he gave it to Reb Zalman Shimon, the Rav, that he should eat it on behalf of everyone else, so there should be someone else is eating some food. But before that was Shabbos. Before that, on Yud Aleph Nisan, the Rebbe Verbringt on Tuesday night. So that was on Monday night, early Yud Aleph Nisan, Monday night. I'm sorry. The Rebbe Verbringt on Tuesday night. Yud Aleph Nisan was on Wednesday. So the Rebbe Verbringt on Tuesday night. Towards the end of that Verbringen, after the Maimer, the Rebbe came out with the mitzvah of Sefer Torah for the children. And the Rebbe gave all the pratim and the klolim. It has to be it can't come out of the old city of Yerushalayim. And how to make the certificate. And he gave every single detail for that Sefer Torah. The next day was Yud Aleph Nisan. On Wednesday, the Rebbe comes back, and that night, another Verbringen, early Yud Gimel Nisan. Early Yud Beis Nisan, Wednesday night. And the entire Verbringen was all about the Sefer Torah. Nothing has been done. It's been 24 hours. What has been done? The entire Verbringen, except for the Maimer, was about the Sefer Torah. And then the next night was Leil B'dikas Chometz in Tavshin Mem Aleph. The only time that the Rebbe ever Verbringt on B'dikas Chometz by night was that night. The truth is that B'dikas Chometz was muktim because it was Thursday night and Pesach was Motzei Shabbos. Still, B'dikas Chometz by night that the Rebbe should Verbringt was the only time the Rebbe Verbringt was in Mem Aleph. 3 Verbringens, 3 nights in a row for the Chazakah and all about the Sefer Torah of the children. It was very, very choshev to the Rebbe, that mitzvah. That was mitzvah Mem Aleph 6 months after establishing Tzivos Hashem. In Mem Beis, the next year was Shnas HaShmeini. We just heard before from 511 that a new niggin was made. New niggin. The new niggin was such an unbelievable excitement. He was makatzer to what enthusiasm there was about that niggin. And something completely Yotze Dofen happened on the Gimel Nisan Verbringen. We all know about the Tanya. Shnas HaShmeini, very famous here. But on Yud Gimel Nisan, the Rebbe said a Maimer. And the Maimer was a Dibur HaMaschel of Ho Lachma Anya. Anybody chop what's wrong with that? He didn't say Hey Lachma Anya. Now in Lamed Tes on Yud Gimel Nisan, there was also a Maimer, Hey Lachma Anya. And on Mem Beis, Ho Lachma Anya. Very unusual. That's Mem Beis. Mem Gimel and Yud Aleph Nisan, the Rebbe started the Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach in a strong mitzvah, as a mitzvah. Told the story of a man who was on the yacht, and he asked to daven to the Eibishter, and he talked to the person, and it had a very strong impact on that person. Mendel was, of course, the Tanyas again. Memhei in the Sikha of, the second Sikha of Tavshin Mem Hey was Siyam Rambam that year, the first Siyam Rambam, but in that second Sikha, the Rebbe said, it's strange that a person should be sitting and talking about his own birthday. And so the Rebbe said when he was in Cheder, they told a story of a Rav who had a very position in a big city, but he was a short guy, a little guy. And so they said that the Kleiner, he was talking a short person, but he occupied a größer Benkel. And so the Rebbe was basically saying that in Lubavitch that it's not about him, it's more about the Benkel. And the Benkel is a big Benkel, the chair is a big chair. Interestingly, that was the last time the Rebbe Fabreng on Yud Aleph Nissen. Because in Mem Vav, Yud Aleph Nissen was on Sunday, Mem Zayin, Yud Aleph Nissen was on Friday, and the Rebbe said he's Fabreng on Shabbos. Yud Aleph Nissen can never fall on a Shabbos. So there was never Fabreng on the actual day of Yud Aleph Nissen. And after Tismach, that was it. There was no more weekday Fabrengens. That was the last time the Rebbe Fabreng Yud Aleph Nissen. Just one more point about the Yud Gimel Nissen Fabrengens. Yud Gimel Nissen in Tavshin Mem Gimel, and again in Tavshin Mem Hey, and again in Tavshin Mem Zayin. In Tavshin Mem Gimel, the Rebbe said at the end of the Fabrengen, after the Alter Rebbe's Nigen, after all of that, the Rebbe said they should sing Alachas. In fact, the Rebbe himself started that. Somehow the Rebbe whistled almost every single time the Rebbe asked to whistle doing Alachas. And then the Rebbe started bouncing around, mamish, making, really heavy and singing with. And in Mem Hey on Yud Gimel Nissen, it was unbelievable, much more than that. You hear the Rebbe Pasha screaming, you hear the Rebbe singing with, and then like the olden days, really, really, really heavily into it. That was the theme of Yud Gimel Nissen was, let's go guys, come on. This was like more personal, Rebbe to Chassid type of feeling. And in Mem Zayin, the Rebbe said that there should be the new neighborhood in Yerushalayim. The Rebbe set up then in Tavshin Mem Zayin, but there was no Alachas then. Pesach Sheni, the Rebbe said they should sing a Pesach Dik and Nigen. So Rabbi started V'hisha Omda, which is the Rebbe's Nigen. And after V'hisha Omda was over, the Rebbe went Alachas and turned right away around to the whistle, and then the hand and the concept. The Rebbe loved that Nigen, Alachas, because it has a lot of ayahs in it, a lot of shturim in it, and the Rebbe wanted us to shturim and feel the enthusiasm and the inspiration. So we should go out, and there should be alachas kama v'kama. That should be much more, and much more, than we should be zeicher to be able to v'neichel sham in azvachim and in Pesachim together with the Rebbe take it from the Yad Mamish. Just one more point. I forgot one thing. In Tavshin Mem Tes, on Yud Gimel Nissen by Nacht, Erev Pesach, the Rebbe said the Maimah Matzazu. Why was that unusual? Well, first of all, the Rebbe had stopped a Maimah with a Nigen for 2.5 years. The last time before that was Bereshis Tavshin Mem Vov. And this is Erev Pesach Tavshin Mem Tes. Secondly, the Rebbe stopped saying Mamorim Bechlal. In Mem Tes, it was only Shabbos Shuvah, and after Shabbos Shuvah there was no more Maimah till Erev Pesach. That was totally unusual. I remember going upstairs afterwards to the Hanachas, and Rabbi Yoel was there, and he couldn't contain himself from excitement. He was bubbling over, and so I said to Rabbi Yoel, does he think it? But why this night? Why was it talking this night? Yud Aleph Nissen with Rambam, Yud Gimel Nissen. He said, "Basra, this is doch Yud Aleph Nissen." There was all one hemshech. Yud Aleph Nissen. That was the Yud Aleph Nissen Gili for that year. Sometimes it happened on Yud Aleph Nissen, sometimes it happened on Yud Gimel Nissen. But the whole week, Yud Aleph Nissen, Yud Gimel Nissen, Pesach, Yud Ches Nissen is the Rebbe's father's birthday. Aachen Shal Pesach, Mashiach, all of this is all connected to Yud Aleph Nissen. So the Rebbe should help us that before Yud Aleph Nissen starts, we should already be able to be zeicher to the Mashiach Suda together with the Rebbe take it from Yad Mamish.
We bless Yeshikoyach Rabbi Lu, and one that Tuna Kudus, after sleeping in company, there was a different night of Fabrengen, so it's homework for the boys to look up. Yeah, I don't know for sure it's tape talk, but another thing is that a lot of Bochrim saw that it wasn't Mamorim, and they made a hachlota and the yeshivas that Bochum should learn the contrasim that were coming out. We know today is the Mamorim of the Rebbe, the Mugadik Mamorim, Balpeh. And after each one came out, a Rishima went into the Rebbe with an amount of Bochum from every yeshiva that learned the Maimer Balpeh. And it was a few times. The shliach today, he's today in England, leads England, Rabbi Danov. He got twice an answer, and he wrote these very interesting Lashonish, which I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to say it. But there was a big Jewish chain from the Rebbe on these memorim. But what I do want to add is that one time Rabbi Klein said, "Yeah, you got an answer," and this he says, "Don't worry, you're going to get an answer." That was a little bit before that Maimer, and some people say that because the Rebbe saw there was such a koch in Bochum learning about Peh the Maimer, those that said that was also an answer on those duchs that were increasing amount of Bochum learning the Rebbe's memorim about Peh. So it's an Inyan Shazman Grom and even out this. Without further ado, it's my privilege, pleasure, and honor to ask Harav Minkowicz to be Mamshech, and I see he has over there the Tavshin Lamed Gimel Haggadah there too. He's going to be Mamshech and talk about Pesach, and there's a lot of stories about this. And without further ado, Harav Minkowicz. Rabbi Minkowicz also experienced this many things firsthand, so it's a big schus for us to hear it, and it's always a big thing to hear Rabbi Minkowicz relive these in. It's like you're there. It's not just like you could be there. If you write now, the Rebbe writes, you could be at a place. If you close your eyes, you could be there. But Rabbi Minkowicz, he's going to take you there right now.
First of all, about the Nigundim, is tomorrow we start saying Hallel. So that's a special Nigun. It's a Nigun, Tilim, Kupit Gimel. The Mamsh is with Hallel HaGodel. The coming of Mashiach, V'Korev Mamish. Also, Tovshin Chav Beis, Shnas HaShishim. So then Rabbi Dubov from England was there, and he got up and he sang on the capital Samach Aleph, Yomim Melech Teisif, from England. Not the regular Nigun. So I gemacht an anderen, gemacht eigenen, was bei der Shabbosike Verbringen, and he got up and he sang a Nigun. This is how it is. Also, it mentioned before about the Haggadahs that was printed in Tovshin Vov, the first Haggadah, the first Chibur the Rebbe made, and the Rebbe's name was there, Later it came out again, Tovshin Tezvov, it came out again, and it came out with his Sofis, and then it came out again, Tovshin Chav Gimel, as was mentioned before. This is what the Haggadah looked like. So today it's hard to get these Haggadahs. Rebbe Zev had the Haggadah of Tovshin Vov. This is the Haggadah of Tovshin Chav Gimel. The Rebbe had this Haggadah at the Seder, Tovshin Chav Gimel, I remember. And I remember also, you see the red letters over here. They gave the Rebbe an addition. The red letters are put on later. So at the Seder, the Rebbe had the Haggadah without the letters. It just said Im. The word Im was printed. But the red letters were not there. Haggadah Shal Pesach, Makut Tamim Minhagim.
Those days, the print color, you had to put it through the machine.
A double process. In nicht einzige Zeiten. And also, in those days, the computer age, and the typesetting, etc. Won't go into all the arichas, the difficulties of printing in those days. So the Haggadah looked like this, which means the right page was a page from the Torah Eretz Siddur, directly a offset photocopy of the Torah Eretz Siddur. The Rebbe's biyurim were always on the left side, except sometimes it added up, so like over here. So there was a lot of biyurim. It went 2 pages across, and then the next page again was on the right side and the left side. Now, it's obviously the Rebbe didn't write his pirushim exactly makbil to the amount of words that are on the right side. So many times it went over. In other words, if you had to look for something here, could be on the next page or on the previous page, because it was a full page here and a full page there. So it's very, very difficult, b'shas to say that if you wanted to follow what was going on, it was a difficult thing. We'll get to that in a second. But Tovshin Tezvov, there was a sophist that came out, so it came out like this, Hashmotis. The original Haggadah was like a page here. When it came out Tezvov, the Rebbe wanted to add. Today, it's just, with a computer, you just enter it where you want, and the page moves up. Those days, everything stayed the same. So the original pages is Tovshin Vov pages. Anything that was added later was added over here, and also by the last page, it says, Hesofel HaGodesh Shal Pesach Mekutim Minhagim V'Taimim. So over here was added a number of pages at the end. And then Tavshin Chav Gimel was added a whole page over here, and every single thing that was added had to do with the Alter Rebbe. Like starting up Hilchas Pesach was in the first Hoyer Shenis Shenitfasu. So it was specifically, it's no direct shaykhs l'chure with the Haggadah of Pesach, but was put in specifically Tovshcham Gimel. Again, we don't understand the alle Inyonim, can ich verstehen. I'll just mention by the Kinos HaShluchim this year, they asked me to speak about the Mashiach Sefer Torah. I gave a PowerPoint presentation. I gave a Hagdome, and I mentioned that I'm aufwärts mit sagen, als man versteht, Punkt wie Ahon im Bnei Adam. That you understand wie Ahon im Bnei Adam. What's Ahon im Bnei Adam? Ahon im Bnei Adam is that Erev Yom Kippur shlokt men kaporis. Mishlok kaporis, we say Bnei Adam yesh v'cheshav tzalmovis. And you have a hon, you have the rooster twisting around your head. And the hon is looking into the siddur together with you. So it says, the hon, Bnei Adam, that's how much we understood being about the Rebbe, around the Rebbe. So anything we say, I'll just tell you what it is, and the Pirushim, everybody can learn themselves. But in the Tovshin Tezvav edition, the Rebbe added an amazing thing that's printed over here. And the Rebbe added from a Siche from your Aleph Nisan Tovshin Tes. And it was printed also in Sefer HaMamorim in the Kuntras that came out, Chag Pesach Tovshin Tes. It came out in that Kuntras. And it says there, Al Pipkudas, made Rechomet Mushalita from the Friedrich Rebbe to add the Hisofes. And one of the Hisofes was the Hisofe was also the Siche of your Aleph Nisan Tovshin Tes. Now, there was no Fabrengen in your Aleph Nisan Tovshin Tes. It was a Yechides that the Rebbe had. And the last Yechides that the Rebbe had by the Friedrich Rebbe, your Aleph Nisan. Okay. Almost been gelernt, get them from Rabbi Elechazeh. All right, that's what's from Rabbi Kazanovsky. In any case, he was told that not to the Rebbe.
Exciting that we always thought.
Okay, that's the Vater beim Wissen. Almot mir gelernt, that this is a Yechides that the Rebbe had, and it's also the last Yechides, and it's interesting that the Rebbe mentions over there, Sapnimius Atzmistik word that is given over me Rebbe le Rebbe. It's given over me Rebbe le Rebbe, and that part is printed over here also. You sure about Kazanovsky? Yeah, good. Kabbalah in the Kabul. Since the Haggadah looked this way, so Tovshin Lamed Gimel, which was the Siyum of Shnas Hashivim, I was then in Kalel, finishing off the second year in Kalel, and Chavri HaKalel were also involved then in the printing, Kutesichas, etc. So we decided to give a matana to the Rebbe, the Haggadah. But the Haggadah should be a Haggadah where properly, meaning they should be able to find the things that every page should have the biurim, ashaychas directly to that page. So some pages have to be smaller of the Haggadah, some pages have to be bigger, etc. And some problems came around that the size, a technical thing, the size of this, the width of this page is not the same as with this page. This page is wider. That's not the Zach. So even that was the Rebbe, and the Rebbe didn't say to enlarge the page. Leave the page as is, and in order that it should look, say the Mesudeh, the Rebbe said to add a frame. To add a frame, this is the Haggadah that we all have today. Everybody knows this Haggadah. It's been reprinted many, many times. So this is the first time it was printed in such a way. So you can see the biurim are over here, and over here it's a shorter page, it's longer. And the Rebbe said to make a ramkid, which is like a frame, that it should, and the Rebbe even chose it. There was a few frames given in. The Rebbe chose this frame to make this frame. Once it was made, we added all the hisofis, which I did most of the job over here to find all the letters, the Michtavim Klolim and the Sichas and letters before the Igros Kedesh came out. Pasha to dig up a lot of letters. We went to Rabbi Mendel Kol Vasholem, who used to learn the Rebbe's Michtav Kloli. The Rebbe's uncle used to learn the Michtav Kloli, Be'iyun Rav, and he had Shilas later. He gave it into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe answered. So he had mamish little settler from the Rebbe. So we added him on the bottom of the letters. It might say Hisof Lachazman, and that's where it comes from. It comes from the answers that were given mostly to Rabbi Mentlik, and then all the other things that came to our possession. Some letters at that time that was somehow received or reached us from Rabbi Zevin Olav Hashem, Meksaviat Kedesh, Yonim Bad Haggadah. Now we have two letters. Then we only had one. We had printed one letter. And in any case, this is the sefer that came out with COVID Yer Aleph Nisan Tovshin Lamed Gimel. When it was brought into the Rebbe, Binyamin Klein brought it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was very, very happy. So finally, a sefer that the Haggadah is, say the Mesuder, that you can actually find the Pirushim directly on the page. And the Rebbe opened up. I heard this from Binyamin. He said the Rebbe looked at this page, the front page, and the Rebbe looked at the last page. The last page finished off with a hadran. The Rebbe made Shnas HaShishim. Shnas HaShishim, the Rebbe made a hadran on Masechet Pesachim, but Pidyon HaBen, who's Mevorich, etc. Makes the Shechiyonu. The Rebbe was crying a lot by that Fabrengen. And the Rebbe gave a look right away. The Rebbe said that the last word, the last ha'oreh finishes off with the words, Tzayre Diyanuki. That's what it says here. The Rebbe said, you finish a sefer with Tzayre Diyanuki. Could you imagine? The Rebbe opened the first page, last page, and the Rebbe said it was given in at night. So the Rebbe said at night they should still try to find, to add something. So middle of the night, we finally got some stamps, and every single sefer was stamped, as you can see over here. It says Lashon Haba B'Yerushalayim. The Rebbe with a stamp. Every single, it was already printed already. All the songs were printed, and the Rebbe asked that we should add the words Lashon Haba B'Yerushalayim. Also, I want to mention when we speak about the Seder, when we were children, young Bochrim, we knew that Akaira, as the Rebbe writes in the Minhagim, and it's taken from the Haggadah, Beisarav Mesad Matzal Mapa V'Lei Al Kaira, not on Akaira. Movado Ad Mur and Mesad Matzal Tashel Kesef. Only the Rebbe is Mesad on Akaira. So everybody knew that you're not Mesad the Matzahs on Akaira. That's what the Minhag Chabad was based on. What says in the Haggadah. Then Tovshin Chavov. The Sefer HaMinhagim was being put together, Tavsh Chavov. And in those days, they didn't even have photocopies. It was very difficult to get. I remember we used to have to get, if you gone to someplace like Savyad, we had to run to Manhattan. And I remember the address, 1 Liberty Street, on Wall Street, near the World Trade Center. It wasn't built even then. And it was hard to get a copy. So when the Rebbe was Magia, certain things, they actually sent the Ksav Yad Kodesh to the printer. And it came back smudged, dirty with the print. It wasn't like today. It was mamish print with ink, schmutzig. And many times, this was in the summer punkt, so I was there. So I remember I went to Ramesh Zaklokovsky, the label Groner, gave us the Ksav Yad Kodesh to bring to Balsham Printing on Sutter Avenue. You know where it is. If you take the train, there's a number of stops, Heintes and Hans Schwarzer Gegend in East New York. And we had mamish the Minhagim, the Sefer Minhagim there. So in many yonim on the way, we did find some place to make a photocopy. It was white on black. It wasn't so easy. It was the reverse. But we stopped. Once we had the Ksav Yad Kodesh in our hands, we had to deliver it. We couldn't steal it for Pesach. But on the way, we made a detour, and we did. So I remember seeing that the Rebbe wrote a Ha'oreh. The Ha'oreh is printed. The Ule Rak al Shulchan Ad Mur Yesh Lases came to have. There shouldn't be a kaira. Then the Rebbe wrote Reshimas and 3 dots, 3 pintelach, which means to fill it, Kveit Kedushat Mushalita. And that's how it's printed. But the Rebbe didn't write Kedushat Mushalita. The Rebbe wrote Reshimas. I saw it, I was holding it in my hand. I think they even have a copy of it someplace printed now, also in some Sforim. They did also get hold of the copy. They printed it up. So this is just a little bit about the Haggadah. And again, the Rebbe used, by the Seder, the Rebbe used this Haggadah, and also the Rebbe had the Siddur Arizal from the Pshapsi, the Ashkever, the Rashash, that he looked in on a regular basis. But I'll get to that in a second. Just machen bekitzer, just give a little bit of a feel of what happened, the Marum from Pesach, the Marum from Aleph Nisan, etc. Erev Pesach, the Rebbe used to give out matzahs, and every person, Yidden came from all over New York City, Al-Chassidim, came to receive a piece of matzah from the Rebbe. The Rebbe used to wish Makosh for Elohim Pesach, Rebbe Baruch the Rebbe gave. And the matzah was baked Erev Pesach, was Erev Pesach the matzahs. So the Tana Rishon, the Rebbe used to take for himself. I remember one year they said that somehow the Tana Rishon was very, very hot, and almost all the matzahs got burnt, and the Rebbe basically had very little for Pesach, just Kametzaris had for the Zdorim. And the rest of the matzahs was used to be given out for people who stood online and they got matzahs. And those Bochrim, who were in charge of it, who took care, make sure there was Elter the Bakrim took care of it. Rabbi Mentlik was the Fakir Chloli and the whole thing. He was up a whole night to making sure everything was in Kasham. Those who Rabbi Mentlik was a Daikin Beyeser, a Frumerid Betachlis, weißt but im Snagen nicht call him a Tzaddik, but he call him a Beiner is a great Sach. Mama is a Frumerid Betachlis. And Maim Shalonu was the night before. So Maim Shalonu, the Rebbe used to go to the Eil, it was mentioned before, Yud Gimel Nisan. And the later years, the Rebbe used to come back, as we know, the Rebbe came back way after the Shkia, B'chulu, and Maim Shalom has to be done this money. So, but in those days, as strange as it may seem, the Rebbe used to come back on time, Derech Klal. One was a Balabatish Tam, again, Zahund I don't know, but the reality was, and to everyone's shock, that you may be shocked to hear this, that at the Ohel, there was no lights whatsoever. The Rebbe stood in the dark. It was a dark day, a cloudy day. The Rebbe stood in the dark. It was a rainy day. The Rebbe got soaked. There was no cover. There was no gag. There was no heating. There was no air conditioning. Zero. Alle gedenken that today it's hard to imagine such a thing. Agaburke, the Rebbe used to bring like that outside also. And the Shalash was also the Zelbazach, Enkam Mekeme. But Pashtus, when it got dark, getting darker, the Rebbe used to leave. There was and also the Rebbe, it seems, in those days, was more, Akaponim, the Shkia, tried to daven mincha by the Shkia. There's at least one case that I know that the Rebbe stopped in a gas station on the way to daven mincha. And one time he stopped even, like I mentioned before, the Balshan printing and Mordechai Shustum and the printing. My Shver used to work there. So once he was working there and he saw that the Rebbe walked in. So what's going on over here? Guys were sitting by the line of type machines, and the Rebbe walks in, and it's on the way from the Ohel. There's a street called Sutter Avenue. He passed by there and was getting the Shkia. So daven mincha over there. Daven mincha in the so upon him, the Rebbe used to come back basically from Maim Shalonu. Most years was there on time. Maim Shalonu was what today was the Sukkah is. They used to pull a pipe from the basement. There was no mayan like which they had later. I'm talking before Tavshkov Ches. So they took just a regular pipe, the regular city water, and they pulled the pipe, and the Rebbe went out to the Chotzer, which today is the Sukkah, and the same procedure. You've seen videos of that. Later on, when they dug the kval for Tashlich, which is, as you know, it's in the driveway near the Rebbe's library. So from there, they also schlepped water for Maim Shalom. And Sanki Eliyata, v'chulu. After Maim Shalom, was after Ma'ariv, was Mechiras Chometz. Mechiras Chometz used to take place. Rabbi Shmuel Vitin, Rabbi Shalom, he was the Rav that the Rebbe sold the Chometz all the years till he passed away. Tov Shalom Medalet. And one time, I was in 770. It was night of Dikas Chometz. Everybody empties out. A bocher was hanging around the Mr. 70. It was very, very empty. And I was standing in the hallway. And I said, how can I try with another bocher? And I see Reb Shmuel came out of the Rebbe's room. Reb Shmuel's room, Reb Shmuel used to sleep and eat and live in 770, which today is known as the Yichud room, and also the library of the Bochrim in the Zal, the last, all the way behind the Cheder Sheni, there's a Sifriya, a library for the Bochrim. That used to be his bedroom, and the Yichud room used to be his kitchen, his dining room, and living room, all combined in one, and that's where he lived. So he went back to his room, and we're still going back to Chainik in the hallway. Mitamol, I see the Rebbe's rushing down the hallway. Mamish rushing, walking very, very fast. Very rare to see the Rebbe walking fast. Very, very rare. And the Rebbe walks down very fast down the hallway, and we moved to the side, and the Rebbe was like talking to himself, and he says, Ike shachachti. Just when he passed by, I was standing with another bocher, Ike shachachti. I think it was Level Shapiro, if I'm not mistaken, standing together and talking. And he went all the way to the Shmuel's room, and then he went back. We had to find out what's the Ike shachachti. So we went to the Shmuel, and we said, what happened over here? So they said that the Rebbe didn't give him money for Mechiras Chometz. The money, Harav, you have to get money. All the Rabbanim should know about this. Okay. The people, the Rabbanim should know. They should hang up the story. They should know. Mechiras Chometz, I'm getting my per $1. This was Samatov Shalamed, I think it was. What? And the next day was the burning of the chometz, Sefer chometz that took place in the boiler room. Today you have no access after Parshas Asfarim. Everything was locked up over there. So the furthest you can get is till the elevator. After the elevator, you made a left. Where the door is now, there was no door, and you made a left all the way down to the boiler room. And over there, the Rebbe used to burn the chometz. In those days, there wasn't a lot of pushing or whatever, so we were able to go down. And the Rebbe used to have a big iron pole to spread out the chometz, to spread out in a way, and it should all burn out properly. And then, in the afternoon, was the Chalukas HaMatzos. I remember, this is Tov Shin Chav Hey, I was walking down Kingston Avenue, it was somewhere around 2:30, 3 o'clock. I said, I'll go on 770 for a minute, see what's happening. So I go, there's nobody there. And I go near the Rebbe's room, I see that the Rebbe's door is open. The door to the Rebbe's room is open. And I see the Rebbe standing by the side of his table, his desk, wearing a sutuk, was Erev Shabbos then, and saying, the Siddur was open, he was saying, Heidun Paschalio. And inside, I remember it was Noske Wolf, from the Alter Bochum in those days, and Nachal Zachabad, and another few Bochum who were Masada the Matzos. They just came back from the bakery. They just finished the baking to give out for Chalukas HaMatzos out of Pesach. And they were inside, be Masada, so the Rebbe should be able to, but meanwhile, the Rebbe was saying, Heidun Paschalio. So it was a nice sight to see. The door was open this much. I was able to see inside the room. So I wait around, what's happening over here? After a few minutes, the Bochum, they came out, and right behind them comes the Rebbe. And Chav Hey, the Rebbe daven for the Yomit. And the Rebbe is going into the Zal upstairs, and is going to the Yomit. There's only one problem. There's, I don't know how it's now. In those days, once a year, they painted 770. I don't know if they still do it now. They paint it. So maybe Bochum clean that today. They don't have to paint, basically. Then in those days, once a year, covered Pesach. So this is Mamish Erev Pesach. So all the Sforim were on the tables, and the Siddurim and the Chumoshim and Sforim and everything was on the Omid. The Omid, the Rebbe had to daven, was like this, piled high to the sky, as they say, all the way up. And the Rebbe's coming in. There wasn't even a minyan. There was maybe 7, 8 people there together with the Bach and myself. And the Rebbe's coming over. You couldn't even get over. I couldn't put down the siddur. So I ran over. I think Shlomo Kunya was on the other side before he went on shlichus, and he started taking over the Sforim. And then underneath was candles. I had to put the candles on. So the Rebbe had to move back a little bit. We put the candles down, 5 candles. He was putting the candles, I was lighting the matches. Somebody ran downstairs. They found a bocher still drei Zege mit apart film. They don't take off your film. We need you for a minyan. Okay, so he came upstairs with Marshall and the minyan, and then the Rebbe. As soon as we finished, by the way, the Rebbe is interessant. The Rebbe said, "Yashukeyach, Yashukeyach." I was standing on one side, Shlomo Kunya on the other side. Every little thing that did for the Rebbe said, Yashukeyach. Held the door open for the Rebbe, Yashukeyach. Then the Rebbe pointed, I remember, with his finger like this, because right near the Omid is the door. You know what I'm talking about? You know, there's a door on the right side of the Omid. In those days, there's a Beis HaKised, I don't think it's used there, Beis HaKovet, that's over there. And in the later years, they made a door from the corridor itself, from the hallway itself. There's a door before you go into that little area that had 3 doors. The middle door was the Beis HaKised. On the right side was used to, in our days, we used to call it the Tzachzimmer, Reb David's room. Tzia Gudas Chabad started and continued for many, many years in that little room, which was as big as Rabbi Chadokov's office. Okay, Dalet al Dalet Mamish, Rest of Saganta Shalak, and Milcha Shabbos, don't know how big it is. Okay, so but it was open. So if that door was open, it was open straight to the door of the Beis HaKised. So the Rebbe went to this, and we knew that the Rebbe was Mahader, that should be closed. So the Rebbe pointed with his finger. So I ran quickly, and I closed the door, and we got a minyan. And then the Rebbe, when they finished, the Stille Shvanessa, the Rebbe asked, "She given send us some gedabent." It seems other times also in Kanamokim, The Rebbe was mahader, it should be 10, even though the Rebbe writes Bavusta Brief, as the Alter Rebbe writes, Areza Communion Gombel, and the Alter Rebbe got break the plates, as v'chulu v'chulu. It seems when the Rebbe down for the Omid, it was mahader, it should be mamish, like, should be mamish 10 people. In any case, then went Chalukas Amatzis. It took a long, long time. In the earlier years, there wasn't so many people, and it went pretty fast. Later on, it took for many, many hours. I remember that we were the first group that went to Australia. We came back. Okay, kids, all right. We came back before Pesach, and we were waiting online. I think it was like old time. Abraham old time was standing online with everybody else. So the Rebbe said, "Who's on the Allah under the shluchim?" So they got everybody else together, and the Rebbe gave each one of us a whole matzah, which was very unusual. Anoshim Yochadim used to get a whole matzah. This was something special, but the Rebbe didn't from shlichus was something very, very special. They got a whole matzah, and the line went mamish kamatel l'shkia, to the extent that later on, after Ma'ariv, many people didn't get, so a few people came over to ask the Rebbe if they can get after Ma'ariv. Before you knew it, became already a minig Yisrael, that many people, maybe Chatchila came after Ma'ariv, for Sparen Zach to wait online, but whatever it is, it went all the way. After Ma'ariv, yeah. And not Ma'ariv, because many people went till after Ma'ariv also. After Ma'ariv and after the Chalukya at night, the Rebbe used to go to the Bochrim in 676. You don't know what 676 is? Thanks for sure. 676 Eastern Parkway is between Brooklyn and New York. That used to be the yeshiva, the dormitory, and the Bochrim Yistid. The Rebbe used to go there and watch the Seder, how the Bochrim make the Kayr, etc. And then the Rebbe used to say a perverter. He used to walk always into the kitchen to see the Babusta famous cook, Musya Nemoiten, used to tell her Gutjonte, says she cooked a whole year for free to get that Gutjonte from the Rebbe. Okay, there's many times things came up. I remember once came up a whole shaila about the mezuzah on the right side or the left side, a certain door, according to Heketzir, Rebbe Ganz Enkan Amokim, I think it was already written how to Mimim about it, b'chulu. So this...
Later on, in this building where we are right now, the Rebbe used to come up to say the right upstairs.
1440. 749
also, and then later than that.
But I remember also the Rebbe went with the Kalilus. But the Rebbe went with the Kalilus.
Yeah.
What? The Bochum made it 1 year. 1 year, some in Bein Hashmoshes. So the Bochum were to eat, they ate with today's the Kil. Then used to call it the Faratz, the Farban, whatever name it had in those days. And the Rebbe, I remember they put up lights all the way up, also a lot of steps to go up. And later years, the Rebbe went to Machen, that was afterwards, went to Machen Chana, and they went to Hadarat Torah, and then to Free, and the Russians, and Yetze Poras, when the Iranians came for the Bochum set, for the grill separate, b'chulu. And all this took a long time, obviously. And by the time the Rebbe started to say, it was quite late. So as soon as the Rebbe left the yeshiva, the Bochum, those Bochum wanted to get to be by the Rebbe Seder, to be the mamish on time. So they made mamish as they express. The Israelis sagen express. They made it express. We gemacht 1, 2, 3, and they came to Meitzi Matzah, Keirich, Shulchan Eirich was you eat the egg, and then was the Afikaman right after that. Okay. So and then später came nach den Stressen, and they used to get the Baruch Hashem to mamish to the beginning of before the Rebbe came in, because it was open to everybody, but it wasn't a big crowd. You have to understand, in those days, Lubavitch here in Crown Heights and Chalwa, it was very, very small, the Fierich, and Jungelite were busy at home, and even Bochum who ate at home, etc. But later on, the later years, it became a little bit more, because it was two kvutzes, one kvutz after the other, etc. So they're able to make it by the Seder. Now, I mentioned before the Rebbe used this Agoda, the Rebbe used, and Tavshich of Gimel, take what the Rebbe uses Agoda, the Rebbe mentioned, I think he told Rebbe Zalman Duchman, that he's going to make sure to say the Agoda a little bit louder. The Rebbe said the Agoda, you couldn't hear a word, basically till the first part. The first part they couldn't hear. All Minhag Agoda, everything's written up right. The Rebbe used to read every single part, and the Mother the Rebbe used to eat mamish. Many times it's coughing Rabbi mamish a shtickle mother. Besides, to squeeze out the mother, all the juice came out. A shtick mamish, the size mamish like an egg. That's a piece of mother, hard mother, which wasn't even ground. Many things push it here. The Rebbe coughing from the chillas mother, and the matzah also took off quite a while. They eat the matzah, and the Rebbe said that he's going to say it a little bit louder. So the second part of the Seder was quite loud, and most years was that way anyway. After Shvei HaMoscha, the Rebbe said mamish ba'aved every single. In the beginning, he said very fast. The second part was very, very slow, with dveikis, with a nigen. Every single word that they can't hear jeden word what the Rebbe said. And since it's the first night, and since the Rebbe came very late, because I've mentioned before, after Chaluk Samatzah, and the Bikur and the Meizdas, as they say in Teuchat Mim v'chulu, so you have to eat after came before Chatzos, and there was no watch or clock in the room except a little tiny clock that was on a thermostat. The thermostat was this big, the clock was this big. Remember a number of times, but by the way, the Frierdiker Rebbe's place was, the chair was there. They used to put a board on the table, because the table that they have, many of you maybe have been in the room. I went in there the first time I went, and after that I said, it doesn't look normal. This table looks small. I asked him, Shalom Ber Levin, it's the same table? It's the same table. I said, it can't be, because so many people sit around. He said they used to put a board on top of the table, because that had a minion sitting around the table. So the Rebbe used to ask, many times I stood behind the Rebbe, it was Meir Harlech, Member Shmotkin, and the Rebbe turned around. Wie viel does he get? Look, I was a younger bacher, I don't want to stick my nose in. So, Meir Harlech's others, they used to run over on the side. They used to say it's 12 minutes to 12, or 12 minutes to 1, depending when the Chatzos was. If they changed the clock, didn't change the clock. So, so right away, the Rebbe didn't start eating till everybody received a portion. And as soon as the Rebbe stopped eating, they all had to stop. So the Rebbe used to take, by the way, the fish the Rebbe ate was full of salt. You couldn't even see the fish. Salt covered the whole thing, from top to the whole top. And later on, the chicken, before the chicken, there was a yurk, mentioned a yaichel, there was a soup that was served in a big bowl from the Alter Rebbe. It's a thing that they have Yerusha from the Alter Rebbe, that some things they had that got lost, it seems, but the mamish came back from this man of the Alter Rebbe, and the Rebbe used to take three big spoons and put it into his plate, and everybody else took it the same way, and the Rebbe used to eat, but the Rebbe many times ate just a little bit, some they ate nothing, to go quick, and everybody had to stop. People by the Seder many times went away pushed hungry, so he wanted to eat, had to eat something out of Pesach, because he went away pushed. Once a guy he wrapped up in a napkin, he wrapped up a chicken, and he put it in his pocket. The Rabbi even saw it. The Rabbi looked at him. Especially after I came, you can't eat anyway. This is even on a regular yontif, it was a problem. But the Rebbe stopped eating. They stopped eating. And then the Afikaman, soon they said it's 5 minutes, 5 minutes. So the Afikaman had to start, and had to start right away. And then the Rebbe had it between two pillows, that on the chair next to him. Nobody sat the Haseva. Rashag had a little pillow, but he was never Mesiv. And just the Rebbe was Mesiv. He took out from the Afikaman. Now, so das man ist kurz. Macht a bisschen just bekitzer. Asked to mention also about Tovshin Chavtes. Between the two pillows. On the chair next to the Rebbe sat on one chair. Next to the Rebbe was another chair, and the back was this way, like this. The back was this way. There was two pillows. In between the two pillows, I think it says the Loshen. Bein Nakarim. That's what it says, the Loshen. That's how the Rebbe used to keep it. He used to break into 5 pieces. The alle Sachen sind alles gedruckt, and it's in the Menhogim, and that's why it took out the Afikaman. Tovshin Chavtes, as mentioned before, we came back from Australia then, and we came to the Seder, and one of the Shluchim, the Rebbe Kaplan of Asholem, was standing right behind the Rebbe, and the Rebbe turned around and asked, Shigasnam Afikaman. So he moved away. He didn't know who the Rebbe was talking to. So the Rebbe said, Ich mein dir, Kaplan. Shigasnam Afikaman. So he said, yes. You have to tell the truth. Yes, finished. That's it. The Rebbe didn't say anything. The next day, we figured, if the Rebbe asked, on the second day of Fratis, nicht kein Problem. Besser nicht essen Afikeman. You can always take the Afikeman in your pocket. You can drink a ganze Nacht and essen a ganze Nacht. So that's what we did. We washed, and in the house we washed. We had a Mendel at the bench in 770. And they took along the Afikeman, and our cases felt nicht Baruch Hashem, the Kol Mashke in 770, felt nicht kein Wein dort. So we'll take care of it. So again, the Rebbe turned around and asked again to get some Afikeman. So this time he said, that nicht get some Afikeman. So the Rebbe took from his Afikeman, that's laying by him in the bag that the Rebbe had, the Afikeman, the napkin, and he added matzah from the table, some more matzah. There was 5. One of the shluchim, one of the bachar was not there. They went to eat. They lived in the Bronx. They went to the Bronx, but 5 were there, and the Rebbe gave each one. The Rebbe gave from the Afikeman, and the Rebbe said that they have to sit down. So the Rebbe said they should bring 5 chairs around the table. There's no this lemtish, 5 chairs of hagodis and cases, and to make sure that they have the arbor cases and the wine, etc., whatever they need, and the Afikeman and v'chulu v'chulu. And the Rebbe looked a few times to pushing, but that time was already pretty tough. And basically, you had to sit on a chair. People wanted to stand. Little by little, we were basically pushed out as a little by little, further and further. So the Rebbe looked, and then right away it came back. As soon as the Rebbe looked, everything had to come back. And this was Agavurcha. The first night of Pesach that year, Toshkov Tes, was tremendous pushing, and was such pushing that the bottle of wine poured out on the table, and the Rebbe watched it, the Rebbe looked at it. I was very unhappy. So the next day, it was given over in the name of the Maskirus that the Bochrim should not come in, because what happened last night, nobody should come in, but then they decided that the Kvutze, the Bochrim, that's the Solike Bochrim, they should come in because they're going away, etc. So they should come in. So the Bochrim were allowed to come in, and Rashag asked for them, and we came to the door, and the door was locked. You come to the side door, the middle steps. Today they have a gate over there after Parshas Asforim, but then you're able to go upstairs. You knock on the door, ended up in the kitchen, and to go in and knocking on the door, nobody opens the door. Then one of the Bachrim was from the Kvutzi, came in, so I told him to ask, maybe Rashak could ask the Rebbe if the Shluchim that came from Australia, they can go in. So Rashak asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, Avada, what's the Shaila? What's the question? So right away they let us in, and then this thing, what I mentioned before, was what the Rebbe said was about the Afikeman was then. Also by that Seder, the Rebbe said, we're saying Hal Lagodl, Heidel Hashem, Kitev, Kile Elam Chazdei. The Rebbe said it 3 times. Heidel Hashem, Kitev, Kile Elam Chazdei. 3 times. He said it like this, but a tremendous kavanah. Later they found out that Punkt then there was a bomb that fell in the Sinai with the Israeli soldiers that could have killed Mamish Onashir mentioned. It was Mamish exactly at that time, was Mamish Anes Godel that happened. And also, if I remember correct, I think it was by that Seder, the Rebbe, the pouring back of the wine, the Kes Shaliyahu, was a thing which is beyond understanding. I mean, this is, maybe you read about it, there's no videos of it. The Rebbe used to take the Kes Shaliyahu, pour it back in the bottle. So you add a little wine, you pour it back in the bottle. That's what most people do. But the Rebbe poured from the bottle into the Kesh Aliyahu into the Rebbe's Becher, back Kesh Aliyahu, then back into the bottle. I'm not telling you a specific Seder because nobody knows the Seder. And then it was back into the Kesh Aliyahu, back to the bottle by itself. Then the Rebbe took from the tetzel that's underneath that the wine was there, poured it into the Kesh Aliyahu, then it went back into the Rebbe's Becher, back into the bottle, back from the bottle, hin and tzarik. Maybe 50 times it went back and forth like this. 50 times. It's mind-boggling. 50 times. And to some Bachrim, I remember that once and for all, they're going to crack the code, they say. They're going to find out what's going on over here. So they prepared a whole bunch of different colored papers. They had a blue paper and a red paper and a yellow paper. One was Kesh Aliyahu, one was the Rebbe's Becher, one was this, one was that. They get right in the head. So they give it a lot of papers. No one knows what's going on. Trust me. Didn't figure it out. And I don't know if every day was even different. To remember exactly the Seder. It was mamish. Because it's an Aveda. What's the Pesach game? And people seeing Keli Yato, and the Rebbe's back and forth. The Rebbe's bottle, the Rebbe had a bottle of wine. The Rebbe kept it on the floor. The Rebbe always took care of himself. Nobody served the Rebbe the wine. The Rebbe served the wine himself. And Bakeshal Yos, and then after Keli Yato, the Rebbe said, "Soll singen and so sagt dem Nigen Ishia Samecha." The Rebbe said, "The Welt meint, dass nicht kin Lebavitscher Nigen, sal Lebavitscher Nigen, sagt Ishia Samecha." That was right in the beginning. That was the song for the Yerushische Yidden. It was brought in, Ram Lida brought it in from Israel. It's not an original Lebavitscher song. That's what the Rebbe said. The Welt meint nicht Lebavitscher Nigen, sal Lebavitscher Nigen. Okay, machen Zeit ist kurz. Yeah, okay. I'm just ending with ein Sach. Weißt du, ich endlich damit rechnen wegen dem, ein Stückel hier. This one, we were in Kelul, might take 2 minutes, interessante Ringen. We were in Kelul, the Rebbe said, Tov Shalom et Gimel, that we should make mafteches on the Tzemach Tzedek's memorim. So each Chaver Kelul got one sefer. I wrote up 3 klolim, if it says the word Atzilus, you don't have to put it in. 3 klolim, what to put in, what not to put in. I sent it into the Rebbe. The Rebbe added a 4th klal. So he's ma'asher the 3 klolim, but the Rebbe was gestupt. But the Rebbe did something had to come out right away. And the Rebbe wanted to do Mechanan was going on. And Rebbe Chadakov called in the people on the. Oh, okay, good. Okay, Andik. Okay, good. Andik and sure the. Good. Good.
Never going to help clean it. You're already 20 minutes behind.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, let me just end it in those. So, Akaponim, Rabbi Chadakov called in the Vad. He asked, when to sein farting? They told him, if you're Aleph Nissen. So, good. A few hours later, he calls back and he says, the Rebbe will wissen, welchen you're Aleph Nissen. Which you're Aleph Nissen. And make the long story short, I wrote up the whole thing and I put it on the wall in the Kelul. A few days later, the Rebbe came to the Kelul. Ganze Parshat, Zayn Zayden used to stay in the Kelul. B'Zalma Yafa, the Rebbe told me to check it out. En Kanamokim the Hariches. The Rebbe comes down from the steps and I put on the Medois. There's Medois in a Kelul. They're selling baby carriages or renting, whatever they want. And there's this Medois that I had. The Rebbe came down. He went over to the Medois and he reads this letter that I wrote. And in the middle, the Rebbe starts laughing because I wrote over there the Rebbe gefragt, welchen ihr Aleph Nissen. Says the Rebbe read it himself. So the Rebbe soll gehelfen, nach welchen ihr Aleph Nissen, sonst darf man warten, bis ihr Aleph Nissen, das Mamisch ot, plus then the Rebbe to get dolle Mathe, wo you go in to take me out Mamisch. L'chaim.
Thank you very much. There's
A lot more to say, but
the Kohen said, Yosef and Masha Karossi Levanecha Kosovkat. The Mr. Shebe is Damnus, Rabbi Minkowicz will continue. Now you'll know to bring with him, because like I said, he took us there. There's a bus that's going to the oil, to the Tzianakov. I'm president in Kingston. And they will help him, some of these guys, I feel far, Yidal of Nissen.